Ryan. Good morning. How are you? We are so glad to see you and everyone else tuning in, PJ, Julie, Calvin, and Betty. Thank you so much for joining us this Tuesday morning on the COVID-19 Care Conversation. Aloha, I'm Yenji Denise.
And I'm Ryan Kalesuji. We want to thank all of you for tuning on in here to our daily conversation that we have every morning, week morning, at 10:30 here on the platforms of the Honolulu Star Advertiser, connecting you with some of our local leaders as we navigate through this COVID-19 pandemic together. We really try to serve as a resource for all of you, and someone who will be joining us today is someone who always gets a lot of comments, Director Scott Murakami from the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations will be joining us. Last time we had 700 comments during the last broadcast, so we know that there's a lot of people still having questions about their unemployment benefits. We'll be revisiting some of the questions that were sent in that we didn't get to last time, as well as trying to pull in as many questions as we can this time. Of course, we want to first off thank our sponsors, the Hawaii Executive Collaborative, as well as Hawaii Pacific Health, for helping us to bring you this conversation.
Yeah, we really appreciate them, and we appreciate all of you. Believe it or not, we actually do read those 700 comments, and we'd love to see more comments coming in now. We know that you have questions, and they change week to week, depending on whether or not you're able to navigate this system, and that's really why Director Murakami is here. It's his. He's made his time available to walk through a lot of the practical questions. I know a lot of you have some policy questions. Those are really more for our lawmakers. He's really here to handle the nitty gritty and help navigate, I have a claim, now what do I do? So we're going to get into that. We actually went through those questions and kind of boiled them down. A lot of them were repeated questions with similar themes. So we're going to get to as many as possible and keep obviously sending in your questions now. Director Murakami joins us. Thank you so much for being here. Let's get a status update from you if we could. What are the latest numbers when it comes to the claims and the backlog?
Okay, so as of yesterday, we processed a total of 156,253 claims. Of that, 114,451 claims were paid. That's approximately 73.25% of the processed claims that were actually paid. The residual amount of 41,802 were actually denied claims. The claims that we still have in process that are making their way through the various stages of processing of the manual processing at the convention center and in our office is 74,942 claims. To give you an idea in monetary amounts, yesterday we paid out, in one day alone, we paid out $59 million in benefits.
Okay, so
wow.
Making progress. That's we know, but there still is a lot of people. That's about a little over 30%, essentially, that is still waiting to be processed there. What about the 1099s, the pool website for those independent contractors? We know that the initial process was set up where people could begin to build their profile. When will they begin to be able to have that process of filing and start receiving benefits through the CARES Act?
Yeah, you're right. We did a soft launch of the PUA program, I believe it was last Monday, and that was for the application process. We are currently in testing. Our unemployment insurance staff are actually testing the software, making sure that the data that flows through is validated and accurate and processing the claims appropriately. We're also doing a reconciliation of all of the applicants that have filed PUA claims to make sure they do qualify under the unemployment insurance program. And then our target is still for this week to start processing those claims.
So if that means that you filed, let's say, on Monday and your claim is processed this week, when do you actually start to see those financial benefits? When do I get cash in hand, essentially?
I would have to check. I really got to double check. I have an update with our team at 11 today. So, and I didn't want to promise something that I can't deliver. I don't want to tell you something that isn't accurate.
So we do know, though, that you're saying that likely the processing will begin this week at least, so that people can actually begin filing those pool claims and those 1099 claims. That will likely start this week.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ryan. Yes, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
no
yes, you're accurate. Basically what it is the underlying assumption that we have is that if everything goes well in testing, then we should be able to make our rollout date, which was this week. But again, we are still in that testing phase. So until that happens, I want to be careful to make sure that that that's our target date, that we are trying everything we can to start processing it, because we know that there's quite a number of people who are in the queue that have submitted applications to us.
I want to get to some viewer questions. Portia Barrett's question here really echoes what we've heard from quite a few people, which is, my husband's job is calling them back to work this week. They deliver furniture to people's homes. No changes to procedure due to the pandemic in place. How does this affect his unemployment benefits if he refuses to go back to work due to safety concerns?
Okay, so Portia, what's going to happen with the situation like that is that we would have to make a determination as to whether or not it was the reason he did not return back to work was COVID related. The risk of that is that his benefits could be terminated at that point. Now, your husband would have the right to appeal if that were the case, or if we decide to continue the benefits, your husband's employer would have the right to appeal. So it really is a subjective evaluation of that requires us to do a little more investigation. We'd have to call you up and make sure we understand, or call your husband up and make sure we understood why there were concerns, were the underlying mitigated reasons that really warranted that concern, and then also ask the same questions to the employer, and then from there make a determination, and then of course that determination could be appealed. I would also suggest to your husband that if he looks on our website, our HIOSH department, and it's under our COVID-19 frequently asked questions, there are lists of occupations that have different threat levels through COVID-19. So we have occupations that are identified as extremely high risk to moderate risks, and they help you identify what some of the protections are that employers should be providing for you.
I want to go back to a question that was submitted last week by Stephanie, and this is something I know a lot of people in Hawaii work multiple jobs. She's asking, what about people that have both self-employment and employer income? Do they use the PUA or regular unemployment when they're filing?
So that's a great question. The pandemic unemployment assistance program, I got lost for a bit, but the PUA program actually still runs as part of a benefits program. Well, it still requires us to make a determination after the unemployment insurance program. So the best way to look at this is for anybody who has received any type of wages, like for example, if you got a W-2, any kind of wages, regardless of whether or not you have a private business or not, you need to file through the unemployment insurance program. That determination gets made first, and then subsequently, if you do not qualify for eligibility reasons, or if you're denied because of insufficient amounts of work history, then you would be able to qualify for the PUA program. But it'll default first to whether or not you were receiving any kind of wages.
So once you've filed those first unemployment for that and you've been denied, do you then need to file a new claim for PUA, or is your claim essentially just kicked over to the new system?
Unfortunately, they would have to file a new claim. And the reason for that is the two systems are completely separate. So we would have to ask them to file a new claim.
Okay, I want to bring in another question here concerning the qualification process. Are PUA applicants asked to provide 2019 tax information? If yes, are they allowed to provide 2018 tax information instead, being that the filing deadline has been extended to July and many people have not filed for 2019 yet?
That's a good question. I would have to defer to I would have to check with our tax department, because I know it hits the tax database and it does do some verification there, but I don't think they're required to provide that. And I don't want to misspeak about that. So what I can do is I can check with them, and I'd be happy to give you an update next week, if that's okay.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Well, Connie is saying, Connie Kramer says, I tried calling 15 times today so far. No waiting in queue, just tells me heavy call volume, so call back later, and hangs up. What is the latest on the call volume, and have you decided on certain days where people with certain last names should call and whatnot?
So right now, I can tell you that thanks to the additional phones that we put on Saturday, we're taking about and responding and solving about 1,500 problems for claimants whenever they call. So what we're doing now is when we receive a call, we actually try to file the issues or the concerns or address those concerns immediately instead of having it wait in a queue. That way we're able to address things more timely, we believe. So what I would just say is that, I appreciate your patience. I'm sorry for the large volume, but all of the 74,000 people that or claims that we're working on, a lot of them are calling us in regards to what the status of their claims are. We are still getting calls from people regarding assistance with filings, but these are for newer filings. And then for people who have had concerns about previous filings, I can tell you that we've reached out and we were able to contact all of those individuals. So, because we have multiple functions in terms of the call center, that's part of the reason we can't get to all of the calls at the same time. So again, I just appreciate your patience.
One of the issues that we know that some people had was just logging in. And one of the questions that we had submitted earlier was, what do I do if my temporary password expires? And when I try to click on the reset password, it doesn't recognize my name. So issues logging in and getting access to passwords and login.
Sure. So first off, we did migrate the login and password reset capabilities to our new SQL platform. And that's really what's helped out a lot with the weekly certifications. So we do know that the throughput on the using the replicated server environment through SQL is much more efficient, and it is yielding the types of results we want. So that's the good news. Regarding specifically the login, we have reset the login password duration in which your temporary password is valid to 72 hours as opposed to 24, because unfortunately with high volume, people weren't able to get in the pass. But I can tell you with that particular one, what it sounds like is that the username may be incorrect. So I double check your username first, because the only way we would be able to repair that issue would have to call our password reset number. And I think that number is, here. 833-901-2272, and that would help us help you with the username. But I double check your username first.
And remember, all of those numbers and who to call is all on the website. So if you happen to miss that 800 number just then, the numbers are online. Diana White asked a question that we've seen before as well, is how long do we not need to report jobs applied for? How long is that requirement going to be waived?
Okay, so I think the best way to put it is we're watching how the economy opens up. And because, just because it opens up and not all of the jobs are available yet, it really still wouldn't make practical sense for people to be doing that, to have that requirement in place. Now, that doesn't prohibit people from applying for jobs, because certainly there are going to be opportunities of opening up. And we do know that there are jobs that are available because of our Rudder program, our training program. What I can tell you is that we're going to time it with the administration, making sure that it makes sense and it's consistent with the economic recovery plans. So I'd stay tuned for that. And then the way I think it would work is we'd coordinate with the governor's office, and it would be some type of repeal of the previous proclamations that had granted that waiver.
And okay, so another question is with certifications, and we know that you sort of developed a new system with that, I believe last week, but if someone is saying that they're having trouble accessing the weekly certification, is there a deadline to submit these certification claims? Is the UI essentially application disqualified after a certain amount of time because they weren't able to get into the certification phase?
Sure. Well, basically what you want to do is you want to certify earlier in the week, and I think that's why everybody comes in on Sunday. But as long as you follow the alphabet listing that we've got in place, we actually are wire transferring money now, so it comes out much more quicker to the recipient, as opposed to a 3-day wait. I think it comes in the next day. I believe that's what the time frame was like. So we initiated that a couple of weeks ago so that people would get their back pay much sooner. So what I can tell you is that that you will get all of the back pay that you're entitled to, that you're eligible to receive. I'm sorry, can you repeat the second part of that question, Ryan? I don't think I got the whole thing.
Yeah, so it was just what if there is any sort of deadline, and is there a certain amount of time the application will basically be disqualified because time has passed and they weren't able to get in?
Sure. So, from my understanding, and this happened a couple of weeks back, is that our discussion on this happened a couple of weeks back with our staff, was that after 3 consecutive weeks of missing a certification, the claim goes inactive. Now, the individual would have to go and reactivate it, but I've asked our staff to automate that process because I didn't think it was reasonable to ask claimants who have been waiting this long, who couldn't get into the system, to then ask them to go and reactivate their claims. So that is a process that we are looking to automate at this point.
Brandon Blake Taylor says, still waiting on my first claim payout. He's been waiting, he says, since April 6th. In what order are you addressing, first of all, the issues that those 74,000 plus that have the issues? Are you doing those in order filed? And also in terms of payment, if he's still waiting for the first one, in what order are you paying folks?
So, Brandon, what we're doing is we're actually processing the claims from the latest ones that we received to the most current. There were 2 stages, well, 3 issues that we're trying to resolve at the convention center. First one were called level 1 concerns, or things that we could address with filings through the call center. The second level was making sure that people were, their monetary matchup happened, or making sure that the employer match happened. And the third one was much more significant types of issues. Right now, where we're seeing the major backlog, about 61,000 claims are in the highest level of claims adjudication that we're working on. So if basically what it is the level 2 or the medium range types of issues that we're resolving that involve the monetary matchup, we were out that for about 1 day. That's how far we caught up. The real challenge is that at the level, the highest level, the ones that require adjudication, and this could be for reasons such as just the verification of why somebody left work and why the separation of duty happened, those sorts of things that require us to actually do some fact finding and then to render a decision. Those are the ones that are taking the longest and or actually furthest back, I should say. I don't have a specific date as to when those are back, but I can tell you that from the call center, which we've cleared all the backup filings that we needed to get in contact with people on, and the monetary matchup, we are out to just the previous day.
I have a question. As people start to go back to work, but they still did have that large chunk of time where they were unemployed. If you go back to work now, do you forfeit that money that let's say you're still arguing out that claim, but then suddenly now you have a job. Are you still at some point entitled to the money that you missed?
Yes, Yanji, you are. The claimant would be entitled to that. It really looks at the period of separation and what actually generated that separation. Was it involuntary? Because the fundamental rule with unemployment is that it has to be a separation of duty through no fault of your own. So if you choose to leave work, if you decide, well, this isn't for me, and you leave, right, then the claimant, in all probability, will not be a recipient of the unemployment insurance program. So it really looks at when you separated for duty, the reason for separation of duty, were you able and available to work during that period? And if you were, then you would be entitled to all of the benefits within the period between when you lost your job and when you were rehired.
We're seeing a lot of people who are mentioning, and you had mentioned at the top, people who have disqualified, who haven't maybe met some of the qualifications. Maybe there was an error made. What is that appeal process like for these people? Some people saying that they have filed an appeal. Do they just wait for the office or someone from your office to contact them again, or do they continue to check up on this appeal process for those that they feel that maybe they unrightly got disqualified?
Yeah, so normally, Ryan, they would go through our appeals process, and they would get the contested case would then be heard by a hearings officer, and the final determination would be made. But what we did was we created that disqualified email address. And the reason for that is that you can get disqualified for a number of reasons. One, you could be disqualified because of the reason for the separation of duty. You could get disqualified if there was ever a case where somebody had committed fraud. And some of those have indefinite disqualification dates. So the reason we created that is to make sure that we are implementing or enforcing the right disqualification date. That's the first thing. The other thing is that some people get disqualified because they just don't have enough wages. And what we can do then is we can do an alternative base pay, alternative base period calculation. And so we use that as a double check to make sure that the individual did get their benefit was calculated both on the normal UI process and on the alternative base period. And then from there, we would issue the appropriate benefit or fully deny the individual. And if they were eligible, would then be able to qualify for PUA.
There were some questions here about, this was an interesting one. I was overpaid. This is Janice Levy. I was overpaid. What do I do? I would assume, and Janice, I don't know your specific circumstance, but this could be individuals who maybe thought that they were being laid off, and then their company got PPP funds. Then they got paid for PPP and they got paid for unemployment. What did they do?
Well, first of all, thank you, Janice, for letting us know, because there are situations where we do unfortunately run into unemployment overpayments. And what happens is on the back end, after all of the processing is done, people have gotten their paid. We actually have an audit office that goes through and makes sure that the claims were paid the accurate amount. So we would be sending them an overpayment notification, and then they would pay us back the amount that was due. And you're right, a lot of it could be that they didn't know that their employer was actually going to pay them their salary once they got the PPP money, and then as a result, it triggered a completely unintentional overpayment. So we would then work with them to retrieve that money.
Another question that has come in the past as well that I don't know that we've ever gotten to, but this one again coming in, Connie, saying that my status is first claim has been paid, but no money since March. What do people do when they see that paid, notification, but have not received any payment?
So, Connie, that's a good question, and I just remind everybody that you do have to certify. By my rough calculations and looking at some of the data that we have, it looks like about 900 people haven't done their certifications, and they are entitled to actually receive payment. So I remind everyone that it is the next step, that after you file your claim, even though your claim is processed and you're entitled to your benefit, you do need to certify, and the certifications then would trigger the payment. Think of your certification as your timesheet, and once you submit that, we'll go ahead and be happy to process your payment.
What kind of numbers, I'm wondering, are you seeing in terms of the new cases filed? How many people are you seeing? At some points you were seeing 20,000 in a day file for unemployment. Has it sort of leveled off, or have things sort of stabilized?
We're seeing, I'm just going to kind of cheat and take a quick look at a couple of days. It looks like we're seeing about anywhere from 15,000 to maybe 2,000 a day that are coming in as new filings. Now, those filings, of course, aren't necessarily claims yet. We have to make sure that they're filed accurately, and then we receive them and process them.
One of the questions, and I know that you kind of addressed this earlier, but kind of diving deeper into it, one of the questions that we had from last week from Stephanie was, why are claims not handled in chronological order, regardless of difficulty? Because some people have been waiting for much longer than others, and maybe there is a issue with their claim, and instead of just putting them in another pile, why not just sort of go in order to address every single one based on when they submitted?
That's actually what we are doing. I think it's similar to the question that somebody asked earlier. We are taking care of the oldest ones first. So as they're coming in, we are processing them in that order. What I can tell you though is, like, if you when you submit it, if you have a more difficult issue to resolve, something that needs to be adjudicated, then at that process, somebody who had an earlier claim that doesn't have that issue would of course get paid for the earlier one. So that's, as soon as you get I guess the best way to put it is, if you have a clean claim, we'll process that in 15 days. And so from there, if you have an issue on it and it's a monetary issue and it's a simple monetary issue, it'll be a much shorter time than somebody who has a case that actually needs to have some fact finding and adjudication and decision making made on it. So what happens is we do take it in from the time we get it, and we do treat everyone as we get them. But we are now adjudicating and making decisions and fact-finding, and I should say fact-finding, then making decisions on the oldest claims first.
How big of a staff are you working with right now? I know that you had started with 7 and then you bumped up to, I think, about 3 dozen, and then you had all the folks coming into the convention center. But what kind of a workforce is actually handling that 74,000 plus the 1,000 every day?
Sure. So we do have about 650 employees that are trained up now, volunteers and additional staff members. Our department had just over 100 people, or our division for the unemployment insurance branch had about 100, just over 100 people in it. So it's significant. It's about just over 6-fold. Now we are seeing people having to return back to their offices, especially as the economy starts to open up more. And that's why we're trying to run down the list as quickly as we can with the resources that we have at the convention center. We are still looking at training additional staff this week. I think it was an additional 200 staff. So, and the idea here is that there are staff who are going back to their work, going back to their duties. It is still a priority, I think, for all of us to get the unemployment insurance claims processed. But we are planning for a time when people will be going back to their desks and having to return to their original duties.
All right, I know we only got a few more minutes left, but I see a lot of questions about backdating, so I just want to get to that really quickly because we know there's a specific email, but it seems like from this comment as well as many others, can you address the backdate requests? They've sent requests in but have no confirmation that request was received. They're wondering if so people are emailing that backdate address, but yes, sort of that process and what that looks like. If you can give an update.
So we are working on the backdating of filings. Those are the things that we're looking at through the email address. But for backdating of certifications, from what I understand, we are looking at doing an automated type of a correction for backdated certifications. But we are working, all I can tell you is for the initial filings, if there's a backdate issue, we are working through the email process to get all of those backdate issues done. We have about 10 additional workstations that we set up within the convention center to help us run that down. But there is still a large population of people within those, or a large volume of messages within those email addresses. A lot of it, I'd say the largest one is for the disqualified emails, asking us to double check to make sure that that alternate base period is not an issue for them. But all of them are slowly being run down. And part of our challenge is, and you can't blame anyone for this, but a lot of people have emailed different email addresses just to try to make sure we get their message. So we are putting in a few more resources to it. We are trying, and you got to remember, if I pull resources from one place, I lose it in another. So we are trying to balance it as best as we can and get through those backlog of email messages.
Based on the current, influx of around 1,000, you said a day, and the 74,000, plus everything else that's going on, when do you expect that you'll actually be caught up?
That's a tough one to say, because I think, I'm trying to see if I can do some type of automated release of issues. It's a little risky though, and so I need to be careful about that. But if my math works out right and my assumptions hold up, in about 24 days, we should clear all of it out. That's without the mass removal of issues. But the challenge with that, the variability of it, or the delta, is pretty significant. And the reason for that is that I don't know just how complicated some of the higher level issues are that take to adjudicate. And we do have some timing issues that we have to be respectful of. So for example, in adjudication cases where we actually have to go between the employer and the employee, and the claimant and the employer, we're supposed to extend them 48 hours both to respond to us. So you can see that adds another level of impact on the time and when we'd be able to run everything down. Yeah.
All right. Well, Director Scott Murakami, we thank you once again for joining us this week and for answering the questions. We will repost this for people because we know we're getting a lot of the same repeat questions, but we'll repost this and make sure that people will be able to hear some of your answers. And we look forward to another update next week. So thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, always interesting to hear from him. We know that you guys had a lot of questions. Like we said last week, there were 700 comments. We read all of them. We will read all of these. We try to curate them so that we're, not just focusing on the few that get to ask a question, but really that they have overarching themes. Interesting to hear him say that, given the volume there, that he thinks it'll take about 3 weeks to actually get up to speed, but that should give us some comfort to know that there is actually, a light somewhere at the end of the tunnel. I understand, though, a lot of people are so frustrated, and it does sound like they're doing the best they can. And good to hear also that they've got about 600 people now actually answering those phone lines and answering those emails and trying to process all of these claims.
It sounds like a lot of the issues still, though, continue with those claims that have some sort of issue. So with a backdate or with an appeal process, I think those are the things that a lot of these people and a lot of people have commented are still trying to get through that process, because they're trying to push through those clean claims, as he sort of calls them, and trying to make up for all those other times. We're also going to be following up on some of the other questions, including the questions about our taxes and filing the 2019 compared to 2018 taxes. We'll follow up with him. He said that he was trying to get that answer. We'll try to make sure that we can get that answer for people as well, and also follow up to see if that 3 weeks in sort of the in sort of the claims and appeal process, if that's going to be extended. He said that he's going to be working with his team to try to find a way to extend beyond the 3 weeks, so the claim does not necessarily just sort of die down and you have to start all over again. So we'll follow up on some of those questions that he didn't have answers for, that hopefully he can provide an update with next week.
Yes, and of course, everyone wants to know about the PUA program and when you're actually going to get money from that. He said he's getting an update actually as we speak. That was his next meeting. So, they did the soft launch last Monday. If you are self-employed or if you've been denied, and you make sure that you do file for that. As he said, you don't automatically get kicked over. You do actually have to file a new claim for that. So make sure that you go ahead and do that. The money is not coming yet. That is that $600 a week that comes from the federal government on top of whatever unemployment benefits you may be entitled to. But do make sure you register for that. No money's appeared yet, but it should be coming.
Yeah, and again, we want to remind you that if you missed part of this, to go back and watch it. We have other weeks that have also posted. You can go back to the Honolulu Star Advertiser. There's a section for this conversation. You can kind of scroll through and find all our past episodes, because some of the questions that, again, are coming in are questions that he talked about last week. I also have we also posted a link on coronavirushawaii.com. If you scroll down to resources, there's an unemployment tab. We sort of listed all of the videos and some of them broken down by topics. You can go through there and get all the answers on that site as well. So coronavirushawaii.com, under resources, under the unemployment tab.
There's a lot of other news, and we know that people are starting to, the state is starting to open up. Pearl Ridge Center is reopening on Friday. So they announced yesterday that they're going to be doing that. They've got some new guidelines, special hours, takeout only from restaurants. The center is going to be open 11 to 7 Monday through Saturday, noon to 6 on Sunday. So interesting to see, as shopping centers start to reopen, as people get the opportunity to go back to work. But that is good news there. But it's going to be very different. Shopping is going to feel very different than it used to.
That's right. And again, we will wait to see as more of these sort of retail establishments come online. Again, here on Oahu on Friday as well, and throughout the state, we've already seen some of the other islands open up their retail locations as well. So one of the things that the governor said yesterday was that they're sort of going to track the numbers now as things sort of begin to open up and as these spaces go up, to really watch those caseloads, because that will give an indication if the curve continues to stay flat, and then they can start reopening other establishments. So we look forward to seeing, hopefully, those numbers staying low. Yesterday, only 2 new cases. So hopefully those numbers will stay consistent. And the governor expected to make an announcement this week for potentially what will be released next week. We'll continue to keep you posted on that as well. Of course, we like to always end the broadcast by highlighting some of the good things that are happening in our community with our Hawaii Hero segment.
Yeah, and today we are highlighting Family Promise of Hawaii. They coordinated for housing for homeless families. And here's one of those families that they featured on their Instagram. And it's so wonderful to see these 4 children have a place to go. They do case management and assistance with locating permanent housing. They teamed up with OLS Hotels and Resorts to house up to 8 families. That's 32 folks, like the little guy you see right there, for up to 2 months. So we really appreciate what they're doing. This was made possible with the support of the Hawaii Community Foundation's Resilience Fund, which was created to rapidly deploy resources in the wake of the coronavirus here in the islands. So we mahalo Family Promise of Hawaii along with OLS hotels and resorts to help provide these resources, also in partnership, of course, with the Hawaii Community Foundation's Resilience Fund.
Yeah, and a great way to sort of use the resources that we have. Of course, we know there's a lot of empty hotel rooms, and great to see this partnership happen. And we salute, again, our Hawaii Hero of the Day and encourage all of you, if you have a Hawaii Hero, please also list that in your comments. We want to highlight some of the good things that are happening because we're really seeing our community come together, and we want to make sure that we give a special shout out to those that are helping to make a difference here in our community. Tomorrow, we continue on with our COVID conversation. We're going to have a doctor in the house.
Yeah, that's right. One of the things that reopened already is elective medical procedures. And we know a lot of people have delayed going to their doctor for whatever they needed that was not necessarily an emergency situation. But healthcare professionals are telling us that we really do need to continue to keep those relationships with the doctor. But I know a lot of people are gun shy. And so we've asked Dr. James Barahal tomorrow from Hawaii Pacific Health. He's going to be joining us, and he's going to walk us through what that actually means, how medicine is changing in the wake of COVID, and what it means for you on a practical level in terms of going to see your doctor, going to see your dentist, whoever your medical professional is. So that'll be very interesting to hear from him because, you know, it's been 2 months for a lot of folks, and there are still procedures that need to happen. They may not be an emergency, but we don't want them to turn into one.
That's right. So we're looking forward to that conversation. And then on Thursday, we'll be joined by Superintendent Kishimoto to talk more about the school's plans and how they plan to reopen. We know that there's a lot of parents as well as some teachers out there that have questions for the superintendent about what plans are going to be happening when school happens, not only in the fall, but also summer school, and how they're planning to implement that. We spoke to her a few weeks back, trying to now get an update on sort of the plans moving forward as we're in the midst of graduation season as well. We know a lot of those schools having their own sort of special graduation ceremony. So we look forward to also having that conversation with Dr. Christina Kishimoto on Thursday. So a lot more coming up here on the COVID conversation.
Yeah, we thank all of you for being here. Please stay safe, continue to socially distance. Yesterday, just 2 new cases. So we are seeing the results, you know, the fruits of our labor when it comes to the physical distancing that we've all been doing. We appreciate you all being here. So until tomorrow, we wish you a fond aloha and take care of yourself and each other.
Aloha, we'll see you tomorrow.